In 2009, Nike would release the 5th generation of Mercurial Vapor, which consisted of two top-end models. The regular Vapor 5, which of course was a replacement for the Vapor 4, and what would be a completely brand new model to replace the more premium Vapor 4 SL, the Nike Mercurial Vapor Superfly 1, a football boot that would retail for an astonishing $350, but blew everyone's mind because it introduced all kinds of new technology, and quite frankly, even still to this day, is one of the coolest looking football boots ever. From a technology standpoint, I really do think that this is one of the most important football boots in modern football boot history. However, this is also one of Nike's greatest football boot fails. To give you a brief summary of the events that unfolded, upon unveiling, you could go and buy the Vapor 5 immediately. However, the Superfly 1 would be available basically a month later. Why that was the case, I have no idea. However, pros, especially the ones endorsed by Nike, had early access to the Superfly 1. Unfortunately, between the unveil and the launch date, some drama went down because three of Nike's biggest endorsed Mercurial athletes at the time, Didier Drogba, Andre Arshavin, and Luis Fabiano, all wearing the Superfly 1 in a match, basically had them explode. One of the many key features of the Superfly 1 was its super thin upper. In fact, it was the thinnest Teijin synthetic that we had ever seen on a Mercurial up until that point, and the way that they were able to achieve that was by way of their introduction of Flywire Technology as a reinforcement element, which are all of these strings that you can see are basically fused into the upper. Unfortunately, the upper was so thin and the Flywire cables were raised just enough that when an opposing player stepped on your foot, the boot would basically rip open. Realizing that this was going to be a major issue, and having already manufactured the Superfly 1 in what was set to be the launch colorway, like I'm holding here in my hand, this is actually a pre-production sample for those that are wondering, they decided to scrap all of their inventory and do a subtle redesign on the Superfly 1 to solve this issue. They added a little bit of thickness to the Teijin synthetic. They changed up the pattern of the Flywire ever so slightly, and I'm sure there were other changes. They just were never disclosed by Nike, which means that this colorway was never actually available to the public in the form of the Superfly 1, only as a Vapor 5, and we wouldn't actually get that modified Superfly 1 until a couple months later when it eventually launched in what was black and yellow. It's now 11 years later, and in celebration of what was a triumphant moment in Nike football boot history, you can now buy the Superfly 1, or at least something that looks like the Superfly 1, in the form of the Mercurial Vapor 13 Elite. As part of the Future DNA pack, I have here the launch colorway of the Superfly 1 that never actually released in the form of the Nike Mercurial Vapor 13 Elite, the current Mercurial Vapor model, bearing a retail price of the normal $250, which is actually $100 less expensive than an OG Superfly would have been, and quite frankly, I'm really surprised that Nike didn't put a premium on these. So what I want to do in this video is compare the two in terms of looks and go over all the little details that Nike have incorporated on what is a very well executed remake colorway, and I also want to compare these two in terms of overall performance and technology, because these are two very different football boots that are built around the same concept, which is of course speed. We'll also take a look at how the boots fit, feel, and look on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around and watch the entire review. And if you are interested in some of these remakes for yourself, I'll leave a little pop-up on screen, or you can click the first link down below. That's going to take you to the review page on my website, where you'll find buy now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes to pick these up below their normal $250 retail price. And for those that will ask, this colorway is only available as a Vapor 13 Elite. There is no Superfly, which is kind of weird to say, and no takedown models. As far as extras go, while I think it would have been really cool to get the original packaging, Nike have not done that. Instead, you just get the regular gray and black Nike box. And of course, they do include a string bag, which is in matching colors. It's the max orange color for the bag, silver for the Mercurial logo on the front. Obviously the same design you get with any modern Mercurial Vapor or Superfly. And then the strings are supposed to be that abyss color, which is like a dark purple, dark blue color, but instead it's almost like a faded purple, almost gray on the strings. Not exactly sure why. Either way, it's a decent string bag. What is interesting to note though, is that the original Superfly 1 didn't actually come with a string bag. It came with these two individual boot bags made out of this velvet material. Totally useless, but kind of cool at the same time. Either way, this string bag gets a rating of 37. Now, when it comes to looks, I don't think there's going to be too many people down below in the comments arguing that this isn't a very good looking pair of football boots. And I love the fact that Nike stayed so true to the original. But I think what's even more kind of mind-blowing here is that the Superfly 1 came out 11 years ago. This Vapor 13 Elite is now 8 generations past the Superfly 1, and they took the exact same design, tweaked it ever so slightly because of the split sole, and you end up with a football boot that looks almost identical to the OG. From 15 feet away, you would have a very hard time telling a difference, which to me is very cool given this whole remake concept. Now, also, the fact that they chose to remake a colorway that never released to the public, I think is very cool from a storytelling perspective and shows that Nike is clearly not embarrassed about the failure that was the launch of the Superfly 1, given that these never actually came out. So the color is that max orange, which I would say they did a pretty good job on. These, you have to keep in mind, are again 11 years old, so there's a little bit of fade to the color, so I'd say that's pretty accurate. They have the silver here on the outside with this kind of split design that was introduced in the 5th generation of Mercurial Vapor that runs all the way through the back and then up the side, just as it did on the original. The only thing that they had to modify is, of course, what's happening here in the split sole, where it kind of connects to this part on the medial side, which you wouldn't normally have on a Superfly 1 because it had a carbon fiber sole plate, but you did have a split sole on the Vapor 5, which is basically the design that this is mimicking. And I really don't have any problems with that. I think they did a good job there. The only thing that I'm not crazy about is the Nike swoosh itself, which is in the right spot. They definitely nailed the positioning of it, but the color, as you can see, is quite a ways off. This color is officially called Abyss, which I think looks like a dark blue. Some people might argue that it's dark purple. You have it there on the big swoosh, and then of course the small swoosh on the medial side. You can see it's on the new version. They still call it Abyss on the box, but it's matte in color and also significantly lighter. It just has this almost faded look to it. Not exactly sure why. Same thing goes for the smaller swoosh on the medial side. It's not a big deal. Again, from a distance, you're not really going to tell much of a difference at all, but it is a minor detail that they did change up for whatever reason. They did incorporate the Mercurial logo right here in very fine script in silver at the back of the heel, which again is a detail from the Superfly 1. Really like that aspect as well. The Nike swoosh on the tip of the tongue has been incorporated here in the form of just a small Nike swoosh, where normally that would say Vapor 360. And then for the sole plate, obviously they don't have carbon fiber. They couldn't probably do a carbon fiber finish, I would imagine. They just opted for black plastic with orange studs, where of course the original has, quite frankly, one of the coolest sole plates and stud patterns ever made. Carbon fiber with the orange studs that have the hollowed out core. Very, very cool. Looks aside, what makes the Superfly 1 so important in modern football boot history is its commitment to technology. And obviously the Mercurial series has always been a very technology forward line of football boots. It's part of the reason why it was popular back then and is still popular to this very day. Not to mention the products over the years, for the most part, have been very unique and also very good. But I think up until the Superfly 1, there was a clear evolution with each new generation of Mercurial. But when we first were introduced to the Superfly 1, it was this huge leap forward that nobody was expecting, and I think really brought forward this go big or go home mentality for big brands like Nike and Adidas, where they really did show something that nobody was expecting, charged this crazy expensive retail price, but even at $350, people still wanted them. However, this is also a great example of how the latest technology and really cool ideas don't necessarily translate into a good pair of football boots, because anyone that wore the Superfly 1 would know that this is brutally uncomfortable. For me personally, I would put it in the top 3 most uncomfortable football boots that I've ever worn. To make a long story short, when I was a kid, I saved up for a pair of Superfly 1s and then wore them to training in the middle of winter in the snow in -10-degree weather for the very first time. Had horrible blisters. They destroyed my feet. I got black toenails on both of my big toes. And needless to say, that was the first and last time that I wore a pair of Superfly 1s before I sold them off on eBay. Now, in fairness to the Superfly 1, not everybody who wore them had the same experience as me. I'm sure there's going to be somebody down below in the comments that thinks that this is the most comfortable Mercurial Nike has ever made. That person probably has feet made out of steel, but that's besides the point. The flagship aspect of this boot was the incorporation of Flywire Technology, which would be the first time we'd see that in a Nike product as far as football boots go. The Vapor 5 did also have a Flywire panel, basically on the midfoot, which did its job and was significantly more comfortable than Flywire all over the upper on the Superfly 1, but this allowed Nike to make a thinner Teijin synthetic, which this really did have a super barefoot feel. Obviously a central lacing system, which was a common characteristic of the Mercurial line. No lace cover like the Vapor 5, because that obviously would be lighter. And this design in general is just more aesthetically pleasing and just works better from a lockdown and fit standpoint because of the deeper lacing system that it allows for. The touch was obviously very thin, low cut construction, which everything was at that point in time. And then of course the sole plate, which was carbon fiber, a carryover from the Vapor 4 SL, although much improved because I don't think the cracking issue was quite as common here. And then of course a Mercurial stud pattern, which was slightly modified. Basically they added this extra stud from the Vapor 4 SL so it would stop cracking. And of course they added holes in the studs in the heel, as well as the ones here at the base of the forefoot, 2 on the lateral side, and then 1 on the medial side. No holes on these front studs, although you can see that they have these little indentations to shave as much weight as possible. And this of course was also the lightest Mercurial that Nike had ever produced up until this point, and I think actually to this day the lightest Mercurial they've ever made. The reason why the boots were so uncomfortable was because of the super thin Teijin synthetic and the Flywire cables, which made for what is an extremely rigid and very plasticky upper material that does not move naturally with your foot. Basically, there's so much structure to the upper that with the laces tied tight, your foot would just kind of slide inside of the boot as it's kind of forced around the upper. It's one of those boots that you had to adjust to, and that, for me at least, was never a comfortable thing. Really, I don't think that Teijin synthetic on a Mercurial, looking back, really got good until the Mercurial Vapor 8. Prior to that, all of them were pretty plasticky, and honestly, by today's standards, this is just not a comfortable pair of football boots. Fast forward to 2020, and we now have the Mercurial Vapor 13 Elite, which of course runs alongside the Superfly 7 Elite, which is the same boot with the addition of a collar. That is basically what the Superfly is now, where back then the Superfly was the flagship model, where the Vapor kind of took a backseat from a relevance standpoint. Either way, I think what Nike is currently doing with the Mercurial series is not only just as high-tech as the original Superfly 1, even though it isn't quite as interesting from a visual standpoint, this is easily one of, if not the greatest speed boots ever made, just based on the fact that it fits tight, it's super responsive, has really aggressive traction, and of course is very lightweight, as you'd expect from a speed boot, but is also remarkably comfortable, which is really where I think this boot separates itself from that OG Superfly. This is similar in weight, it's similar in responsiveness and lockdown, and similar in terms of traction as well, but the comfort difference between this boot and this boot is truly night and day. You couldn't really pay me to play in these anymore, where I would happily wear these, even though I'm not really a tight-fitting speed boot type of guy. It is that good. And just because I think it's kind of interesting, I figured we'd weigh both boots just to see what the difference is. Keep in mind they are both in brand new condition. The Superfly 1 is a size 9 US, the Vapor 13 is a size 9.5, but they're very similar in terms of overall size. We'll throw on the Superfly 1, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.9 ounces, the equivalent of 196 grams. Keep in mind that this was the lightest Mercurial model Nike had ever made up until that particular point, where the Vapor 13, as you can see, weighs in at 6.9 ounces, the equivalent of 195 grams, which is a 1 gram difference, technically a little bit lighter than the OG Superfly, which honestly is pretty crazy. This to me is what's so cool about football boots. You can have two boots trying to achieve the exact same thing, but doing so in completely different ways. On feet, the boots obviously look like Superfly 1, so there's not much else to talk about in regards to that, but I'm sure there are a lot of you pointing out down below in the comments that I have not swapped out the laces for some SR4U replacement laces, and that's mainly because this is such an iconic colorway, I didn't really want to mess that up, and two, the colorway itself is made up of kind of weird colors. It's like an off shade of orange, the silver isn't quite silver, and I don't think silver laces would look good on this. The purple swoosh is this weird shade of purple, and the black sole plate is like the one element that is kind of a normal color, and I guess if you really hated dirty laces and you wanted to be a little bit different, some black reflective SR4U laces would actually look pretty good on these. I'll probably post a picture of that on my Instagram at some point for those that are interested. Either way, if you are interested in some SR4U laces, they're available at sr4ulaces.com with free worldwide shipping on any order of $16.99 or more. link down below in the description. As far as fit and feel on feet is concerned, despite the Superfly 1 looks, these are just regular Vapor 13 Elites. Not a single thing has changed about them at all. So they fit nice and tight. It's got that classic Mercurial fit. But because of this Flyknit upper with what is a really perfect balance of structure and flexibility, you're able to achieve that one-to-one connection with your foot, but the boots do not feel uncomfortable in any way at all. Obviously, if you don't like tight-fitting boots, I don't think these are going to be that comfortable for you, but if you're familiar with the Mercurial series and like that fit, this is easily the most comfortable Mercurial Vapor or Superfly that Nike has ever made. As far as width is concerned, they do have a tight fit, but I wouldn't say that they are particularly narrow. If you have really wide feet, obviously these are not going to be ideal, but I do think they will fit most people. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you're looking to order some for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. Anyways, guys, that's it for my review. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. Again, if you're interested in these remakes for yourself, you can click the first link down below. That's going to take you to the review page on my website, where you'll find buy it now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes to pick these up below their normal $250 retail price. If you have any questions, as always, leave them down below in the comment section, and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you as soon as I possibly can. If you aren't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.